What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, April 18th. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, as you probably already heard, they finally caught up with the Cleveland Facebook killer, Steve Stephens. Apparently he got spotted at a McDonald's buying some nuggets, and they took off. There was a brief chase, and supposedly he killed himself in his car. And there are two issues that I want to bring up on about this story. First of all, I want to know if this guy was on prescription antidepressants, because he's certainly behaving like it. And I think the public has a right to know if these medications are dangerous. The second issue is, why did it take so long to find this guy? He's there with his cell phone, he's broadcasting Facebook messages, and he's live. Isn't the NSA and the FBI and Stingray and everything supposed to find you through your cell phone? Or is that just a big bluff? Or even worse, it was a horribly expensive, bloated government project that cost a lot of money and can't actually do anything? But the fact that they had to wait to actually see the guy, get eyeballs on him, tells us that all this talk about constantly tracking you through your cell phone may not be 100% accurate. Oh my goodness, the government lied to us again. How will I cope? Another breaking story. Apparently over in the Congo, refugees have taken 13 United Nations mission staff as hostage. And apparently the issue is these refugees are sick of being told to wait, we're going to find someplace else. And there are all these people, 530 people, living in the Munigi base outside Goma. And they fled South Sudan last August. Sudan is another place where the U.S. is in there dropping bombs and everything. And they're just getting unhappy. And so they've taken these UN people hostage, and we'll see how that's going to evolve. Now then, we're going to get into the war zones. And I want to start with Korea, because there's something very interesting going on over there. And I think it reveals a couple of things: the war agenda and the deep factionalization of our government, where we know the NSA's gone rogue, CIA's gone rogue, now it looks like the Pentagon's gone rogue. There's nobody really in charge. It's all these various entities that are pursuing their own agendas at our expense and risk of life and limb. John McCain is out there flapping his gums again, saying North Korea is the first real test of Trump's presidency. And all I can say, John, is here's your rifle, here's your parachute, watch your head climbing into that plane, and we'll call North Korea and tell them you are on your way to whip their butts all by yourself. And more critical articles are coming out on this up in Global Research. And they're talking about the problem is not North Korea, it's Washington, D.C. And what it gets back to is the fact that the United States never actually won the Korean War. It ground to a halt. Everybody got tired and said, we're just going to stop in place and sneer at each other. Technically, legally, the Korean War never ended. It's been 64 years of sitting there and saying there's a war going on, but nobody wants to show up for it. And, of course, this is a huge embarrassment for a government that likes to posture itself as being unbeatable militarily. The United States has never lost a war, except for Vietnam. And the Booga Booga is being cranked on up. Latest one is where they're now claiming that North Korea has agents in place already inside the United States, and they've got biological weapons. Ooh, they've got germs. Be afraid. Forget about the nuke thing. The nukes can't get to the mainland U.S., but they've got germs, and they're already there. So they're trying to ramp up the fear. Again, common sense. If North Korea were to launch a biological weapons attack here in the United States, what would be the result? North Korea turned into a puddle of green molten glass. Another story, this one coming out of The Guardian, U.S. military considers shooting down North Korea missile tests. And it's still rattling the sabers. Now remember, most of what North Korea is testing are defensive missiles. They can't reach the U.S., they can't reach Japan, they can't reach Guam. They're short and medium-range missiles that exist to basically shoot at people trying to invade their country. And every nation has a right to self-defense, especially in a world where you have the United States and its allies invading country after country, drone strike after drone strike, cruise missiles, all of it. We know who the aggressors are here. And it is ridiculous to say that countries should not arm themselves to defend against invasion. And as I said yesterday, go back and look at all the countries the United States and its allies have regime changed and drone struck and invaded over the last 16 years. What is the one common factor in them all? They didn't have weapons with which to deter the invasions that hit. And that's what it comes down to. We're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, the other day, China warned the United States not to act unilaterally against North Korea. Today, Russia has chimed on in and saying, basically, there are no grounds to attack North Korea. North Korea has not attacked anybody. And this idea of going around and saying we have a right to destroy a country because sometime in the future they may not love us is ridiculous. It's also a violation of international law. Another story coming on out from RINF.com. Advocates urge Trump to de-escalate with North Korea, not continue to ratchet up threats and military aggression. Because everybody over there is so tense, they're just going to jump at the first signal and hit a button. And once you hit that button, there's no taking it back. Now then, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who used to be Chief of Staff to Colin Powell, is saying the U.S. should stop with all the threats and own up to its own role in the present condition of the two split Koreas. Because the United States bears responsibility for the current conditions in Korea. Remember, 5 years ago, the Koreas were talking about unifying. The leading candidate to be the next president of South Korea is fully on board with what they call the Sunshine Policy. Let's glue it all back together, and we'll have a united Korea, the way Germany reunified. Another article coming out of the original antiwar.com, why Donald should cool it on North Korea, basically looking at all of their recent failed tests. Kim Jong-un can't deliver on his threats. And he's saying part of the problem is that the United States has been stationing soldiers for 67 years in South Korea, sneering at North Korea. Of course that's going to get North Korea nervous. It's the U.S. that's provoked this crisis, as it has in so many other parts of the world. Another article coming out of The Last Great Stand, the U.S. is on the verge of making an extremely costly mistake. And it starts out by stating the obvious. If it comes to outright war, North Korea will be flattened by the United States of America. This is the United States of America playing the big global bully, whooping on a little tiny nation, like they've been doing for the last 16 years. But in the process, North Korea could easily fling missiles into South Korea, into Seoul, up to Vladivostok. And the U.S. would be blamed for all that devastation because the world sees the United States is provoking North Korea. The world understands the United States is the aggressor in all of these current conflicts. Now, here's an interesting story. Vice President Mike Pence is traveling around that part of the world, apparently paid an unannounced visit to the demilitarized zone, look out over all the landmines and everything. And apparently he admitted that the cruise missile attack on Syria and the Moab bomb in Afghanistan were staged as a warning to Kim Jong-un to make him afraid. And that's just as much as admitting that the gas attack on Idlib was a false flag to justify the Syria cruise missile attack. Now, this, of course, sends the wrong message, that the U.S. attacks countries on the basis of lies, and looking at the fact that only 23 of the 59 cruise missiles even got near the intended target is revealing that American weapons may look very impressive, but it may all be for show. Now, everyone's going on back to Donald Trump, and he came on out and justified the cruise missile attack on Syria, saying it was the picture of those beautiful babies. Oh, those beautiful, heartbreaking, heartbreaking. But what about all the other little babies killed by U.S. bombs since Trump became the president? Apparently, Trump's not concerned with them. But in the first 3 months of his presidency, Donald Trump has dropped bombs and killed civilians, including children, in Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. But they don't count because the U.S. did it. But when we claim Assad did it, it's a horrible, horrible tragedy. Now, that all being said, something very strange is going on. Because over at Defense News, and the New York Times just ran this story as well, the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Battle Group is nowhere near North Korea. It's down in the Sunda Strait. As of Saturday, it's down there exercising with the Australian Navy. That's 3,500 miles away from Korea. And U.S. officials are flatly denying the reports that the Nimitz and the Ronald Reagan were going to join the Vinson off the coast of North Korea. So there's a question. Who put out that story that the Carl Vinson was off the coast of North Korea? Was it a bluff by the U.S. government to scare Kim Jong-un? Was it part of this campaign of terror along with the Moab and the cruise missile strike into Syria? If it was, it didn't work. Kim has called their bluff. And coupled with that is a story that actually appeared in CNN. Yes, I still look at them to see what they're saying. And the headline read, Trump may have to be patient about North Korea. And they go on in saying, really, there's nothing different about the current situation with North Korea that hasn't been the same for the last several years. Nothing has really changed. And more saber rattling isn't going to accomplish anything. Now, I could be wrong here, but it's looking to me like somebody just blinked, and they're pulling back from an attack on North Korea. Now, that doesn't get us out of the woods because, as I said before, our government is badly factionalized. We've got a rogue military, rogue intelligence agencies. Somebody could still stage another false flag to try and kick things up. Now, Japan has announced they may consider deploying troops if there's another North Korea missile test that falls in their waters. So they're still out there being aggressive. You know, there might be an interesting theory there. Maybe this last missile test didn't actually fail. Maybe they were just testing the first stage in the staging mechanism because that's where they've had the most problems. And once it's successfully staged, North Korea destroyed it, so that it wouldn't go into somebody else's water. That would be the smart thing to do. Now, then you've probably been hearing that there's this former Department of Defense science advisor, and he's a professor at MIT, Theodore Postel. And he's all over the independent media basically saying the Syrian chemical attacks it's a hoax. We know there was no sarin gas because the white helmets who were getting their picture taken helping the people who were pretending to be dead weren't wearing any gloves. If there had really been sarin gas present, it leaves a residue, doesn't blow away. And the area has to be decontaminated, and the people who are handling the victims and doing the decontamination have to have the full biohazard suits. And they were not there. And so Theodore Postel's put out this 14-page report that debunks the claim that Assad gassed his own people. And with all due respect to MIT, which is where my father graduated, we know the story was bogus from the beginning. Assad was on the verge of defeating the U.S.-backed rebels. There were peace talks starting up in Brussels that would have guaranteed the continuance of the current Syrian government. Even the White House said we have to accept that political necessity. Why would Assad do the one thing that would allow the U.S. to come on in and start supporting the rebels against him again? He didn't have a motive. He gained nothing from it. Idlib was not even a militarily significant target. And if Assad was going to use banned chemical weapons, why use them on civilians? Why not use them on the U.S.-backed rebels? The story just never made sense from the beginning. Now, the former president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, late of the UNOCAL consortium that led to the war in Afghanistan, is out there saying the Moab bombing is an atrocity. And basically, the claim that they were destroying these tunnels, which they knew were there because the CIA built them during Charlie Wilson's war. But the bomb did a huge amount of destruction to the farms and houses on the surface, and it has a huge radius. That it really is a large bomb. And now, of course, we've got Mike Pence saying they dropped it just to prove that they would, which was like Harry Truman, who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to show the world we had them and the political will or the political psychoses to actually use them. Now, President Assad's senior advisor, Botani Shaban, is basically saying the U.S. can create any story as a pretext to start a military campaign. The whole world understands this is what the U.S. is doing. Tell a lie, attack a country. Saddam has nuclear weapons. Boom. Assad is gassing his own people. Boom. What lie will they tell to invade somebody else? They've certainly been ramping up the fear campaign about North Korea. And everybody's saying, oh, North Korea, North Korea. North Korea is not going to attack us. The retaliation would destroy the entire country. Everything that you think you know about North Korea and Kim Jong-un was told to you by the same people who assured you Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. Kim might actually be a nice guy. We don't know. We can't know. Now, apparently, U.S. forces are accused of killing another 40 civilians. They dropped a bomb on a Syrian mosque where they thought there might be an al-Qaeda meeting. There was no al-Qaeda meeting. They dropped the bomb during prayer, and they killed at least 40 civilians. Then they came on back and did a double tap on the survivors fleeing outside. That's become a very common tactic of the United States. Bomb a structure, wait till everybody runs on out, come in and bomb again. Now, Mike Pence may be may say that dropping the Moab and the cruise missile attacks are there to show that America is to be feared by North Korea. It may not be having that effect, certainly in the Middle East itself. Because Syria has been much admired by much of the Middle East for standing up to the U.S. attempt at regime change for going on 6 years. And a lot of these other Middle Eastern countries that have had regime changes, now they're getting angry. And we might see more and more of these countries start to try and kick their puppet rulers out. The whole region could explode. It seems to me that Donald Trump's advisors are no more carefully thinking things out than Obama's advisors. They get an idea and they go with it, and they don't really think it all the way through what might happen. Apparently, Turkish soldiers and Kurdish fighters are exchanging heavy fire in the north of Syria. We're going to take a break for commercials here. We've got callers waiting on the line, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We've got a breaking story. Apparently, somebody went on a shooting spree in downtown Fresno. At least 3 people dead. And the witnesses said the guy was shouting Aloha Snack Bar. And the shooter is ID'd as Corey Ali Muhammad. All right, we're going to start taking phone calls now. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was trying to figure out with the voter fraud in the primaries where Hillary took it away from Bernie Sanders, why no lawsuits were ever filed on that? I know Bernie didn't because he was hoping to get something on the inside when she got in as president, but nobody filed a lawsuit. You know, the Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she steps down, the fraud is acknowledged, and not a damn thing ever happened about election fraud. Not a thing.
Well, first of all, the system is designed to conceal the evidence of fraud, and in most states there are very strict laws that limit the time period where a lawsuit or a challenge can be brought. Here in Hawaii, it's just 2 weeks. If you can't find the evidence of election fraud and file a lawsuit within 2 weeks, then you can't. We also have the fact that judges won't entertain the lawsuits anyway. There was that case in San Diego where the judge actually said, yes, I see the evidence of fraud before me, but California has certified the election, therefore no lawsuits and challenges can be allowed. I mean, the system is completely corrupt and crooked.
Yeah, sure is. Very, very disappointing. Now, I was hoping something would come out of that because, you know, it actually encourages fraud.
Yes.
And if there's a statute of limitations on it, it encourages it.
Our current election system, and by the way, we're seeing indications it's the same all over the world. The election system is designed to facilitate and then conceal election fraud, and that's why it has to change.
Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to Carol in Idaho. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael. Hi, Michael. Thank you. I just want to mention something to the American people by way of you, Michael. Nothing new here, but really I think there's something that needs to be pointed out. I know that you and other hosts have actually pointed out that the U.S. has been involved in wars somewhere on the planet most of its existence as a nation, right? I think you yourself
Yes.
have probably said that a number of times. Okay. However, I think what needs to be said here and repeated often is the fact that in prior times, prior to the neocon Bolsheviks pulling off their new Pearl Harbor, which was 9/11, prior to that, Michael, the U.S. military-industrial complex at least seemed to have some semblance of decency about the way it would handle its conflicts, right? But since then, we just go into war, into nation after nation after nation with no apologies, right up to the Trump administration, and that's all if you understand what I'm trying to say.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. Well, see, here's what's really going on is that in times past, what the people knew of the wars, what they knew of the conduct of the wars, was controlled by the corporate media and entertainment. And so people bought into the fact that we were fighting moral wars, we were following the rules. In the age of the internet and the independent media, everybody knows that that's no longer true. And that is really accounting for most of the difference in the perception. It isn't that the wars are any more brutal than they have been in the past. We're just seeing it. If you go back to Major General Smedley Butler's treatise, All War is a Racket, he reveals in there that long before the neocons, war was all about serving the interests of the bankers. It's just the American people never knew it. They never saw it. Nobody was telling them that was the real reason their children were being killed and crippled.
Well, thank you for pointing that out, because I guess I deduce from that I myself have had an idea that if the U.S. has been nicer than it really has been all along.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And we're coming up on another commercial break, so we're going to hold off on the next phone call here. Over in Iraq, in Mosul, 60 Islamic State militants have been killed by the Iraqi forces. And I want to emphasize that because there's been another development involving just who is on whose side in these war zones. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And FARS News is reporting that once again, U.S. aircraft have been observed dropping aid packages to ISIS near a town in western Nineveh province. And what is going on here is the U.S. is still supporting ISIS to prolong the conflict until Iraq capitulates into allowing a large chunk of their territory to be split off for the future Kurdistan. And every single one of those aid drops, everybody involved in that mission, is technically guilty of the crime of treason, giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war. We've all been told there's a war on terror. We've all been told that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are the enemies in the war on terror. Aiding them is an act of treason. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I was just thinking that I don't know, really, I think it's impossible to know really who's in charge in this country and what a horrible, sinister, loose, absolutely dangerous loose cannon we are. I mean, if you think about it, there's the trillions that went to the Pentagon that we don't know where it went, right? We have the huge black budget.
Maybe
for all
Obama built the Death Star.
Yeah, but but how about the intelligence agencies, Mike? Nobody knows really how much money they make, or how much all their black budgets and all the money they make off their businesses and selling drugs and so on, blackmailing people, I'm sure. Nobody. There's leaks everywhere in Washington. The FBI and everybody is leaking intelligence, and they've tapped everybody's phone. So there's that. The elections are completely rigged. We have instances of the military doing things even though Obama didn't want them to do it. I'm sure the intelligence people do that all the time. We just never hear about it. I mean, we are a runaway locomotive.
Yes.
And I really don't know who anybody can control this thing.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I prefer the metaphor of the loose cannon on deck. But we're hearing from other countries like Russia. They view the U.S. government as completely unpredictable now, and that is increasing the risk of somebody making a mistake. And again, you go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Kennedy and Khrushchev knew that each other did not want to start a nuclear war, and they were able to work their way through that crisis. We don't have that situation right now. We've got Russia, who's looking at John McCain flapping his gums, and Mike Pence saying, yeah, we just blew up a Syrian air base and dropped a big, huge bomb on Afghanistan just to make a point. And they can't be certain that our government or whoever's got their finger on the button isn't going to just push it on the basis of another fiction. And that raises the possibility that if somebody does make a mistake, it could escalate to nuclear war with almost no warning whatsoever.
And Mike, they've had the media about the Syrian strike that, like, out of 48 papers, like 47 of them had pro-strike headlines, and, they're completely reversing track on what they had opposition to Trump. And Trump, a guy who, even if he had the intellect and the temperament to actually speak with the Russians, with all the divisions within the United States, Democrats and everybody calling him a Russian spy and all that crap, which has disappeared, by the way.
Yes.
How can you treat with somebody when you've got that hanging over your head? It's completely ungovernable.
Well, that's exactly the problem. I mean, Russia's Lavrov has already come out and said, we don't know who's really calling the shots in the United States government. We don't know who to talk to. And they're talking, obviously, with Tillerson. But what Tillerson is saying and what the U.S. government is actually doing are two different things. And Russia understands that they can't take anything said by the U.S. government at face value. Because there is this obvious factionalization going on.
The one thing in American foreign policy, even right now, that you can say unequivocally, is that we'll do whatever Israel wants us to do. Other than that, it's a complete loose cannon.
Well, the problem I have with that one is right now Israel is a parasite. And they'll go on sucking the United States until it is destroyed, and then they'll just hop onto some other country, like Canada, because parasites view a host as a divine right, and that the universe is just going to provide more hosts for us to parasitize on. And unfortunately, all these people in the U.S. government who are doing the bidding of Israel do not understand that the ultimate end of Israel's bidding is the destruction of the United States of America. I'm not saying that Israel wants to destroy the United States of America. It's just they can't stop sucking the blood out.
Yeah, they can't stop themselves. That's for sure. The other thing, Mike, is, by the way, when you were saying yesterday about the defoliants of the Palestinian Gazan property, farms.
Yes.
Are they using Agent Orange? I wonder.
I don't know what they're using, but they're using a chemical that is destroying the food crops. Could be Roundup for all we know.
God. Well, we all know what Agent Orange does, and we all also know that Israel's goal is to wipe these people out. So. Yeah,
but the problem with using Agent Orange is they would so contaminate the land that Israel couldn't use it. Any place that they've used Agent Orange, unless there is a concerted decontamination program, that stuff lasts forever. There are still places down here on the Big Island where they were doing the early tests of Agent Orange, and they're still chain link fenced off, and there's big warning signs, do not walk in here, you will die. And that's going to be there for 100 years before this stuff goes away.
Oh, my God. Well, hey. Keep doing what you're doing, Mike. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you. And before we take any more phone calls, apparently over in Yemen, a Black Hawk helicopter belonging to the Saudi Arabian military has crashed, killing at least 12 personnel. They're refusing to say whether or not it was shot down by the people of Yemen. We're going to go back to the phones here. Wes in Idaho, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, most Honorable Michael Rivero. Area of 10 seconds of Merle Haggard before a question about North Korea. Here goes.
What I hated
Okay, Wes, we can't do that. Okay, we can't play other people's music on our radio station without getting a copyright clearance, okay? And why don't you just tell us what you wanted to tell us?
Oh, okay. I want to ask you a question before I run down the 9 names of the banks involved here. Is North Korea crazy? Are they printing their own money? Is that why they're crazy?
Yeah, if you look at the targets of all of this, the war, like Syria, Iran, and North Korea, they have state central banks. It's a government that creates its own currency, and private central bankers hate that. That's why they went into Libya. Muammar Gaddafi kicked out the privately owned central bank, set up a state bank and a value-based currency, the gold dinar, and then told the rest of the world that if they wanted to buy Libya's oil, they had to pay for it in the gold dinar. And other African nations started saying, we're going to start using the gold dinar for trade among the various nations of Africa. And that, of course, was a major threat to the private central banking scam.
I want to name some names here. There's 9 names here. Rothschild of London and Berlin, Lazard, Banks of Paris, Israel Moses Schiff, Banks of Italy, Warburg Banks of Hamburg and Amsterdam, Lehman Brothers of New York, Kuhn Lowe Bank of New York, now Shearson American Express, Goldman Sachs of New York, National Bank of Commerce, New York, Morgan Guarantee Trust, Morgan Bank, Equitable Life, Levi Morton, our principal shareholders. Last one here, Hanover Trust of New York, William and David Rockefeller and Chase National Bank, New York, our principal shareholders. There, I think I've named the names. And thank you.
Lehman Brothers isn't around anymore. They declared bankruptcy in 2008 from the mortgage-backed security fraud.
Okay, you're ahead of me on that. I don't think Merle Haggard, by the way, would be offended by playing that part of his song. But thank you again, Michael Rivero. Another thing, RBN, there's a couple hosts on RBN that are saying we got to go attack North Korea because they are run by a crazy man. This is what I'm hearing on RBN. What's going on?
Well, one of the reasons I like being at RBN is nobody comes in and taps me on the shoulder and says, this is what you're going to say on the program. So all of our various hosts do have their own points of view on these various issues, and obviously I don't agree with them. But again, that's one of the really great things about RBN, is I get to do the stories I think are important. I get to put out my honest, analytical opinions as to what's going on. We don't have somebody in the background saying, well, that story is going to harm our advertisers, therefore you can't go there. And that's really what independent media is supposed to be about.
Well, I'd sure like to see Statner give him the boot. I don't want to hear these people that are telling me we got to go attack North Korea.
Oh, okay.
They're
Wes?
insane.
Wes?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a little thing on your computer called a volume control, and you can always turn it down and not listen to the host that you don't agree with, okay? We're going to let you go here and switch over to Chuck in Texas. Chuck, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. The caller before would have been a great segue to this call. How many times, me personally, am I going to fall for a Zionist? The last person in the world that I would ever believe and trust would be a Zionist. Recently, Michael Savage, who I never paid a lot of attention before because if they're pro-Israel, I just write them off out of hand. He has been hammering Trump over the last week over betraying us and his warmonger stances and everything. He has done a 180-degree turn and is now talking about the glories of empire and how maybe we need to take another look at it and how great it would be for America to go ahead and become empire. I like to have freaked. Last night, I even built a Facebook page for Michael Savage because there was another Facebook page where they were saying everything 180 degrees from what he was saying before, where he was anti-war, and they had a bunch of war hawks on there and neocons. And I said, don't you even listen to what he's saying? And now I'm sitting here at my computer writing a post to put on that Facebook page saying, how many times do I have to be fooled and fall for a Zionist lie? I can't believe the 180-degree turn that Michael Savage has just done. It's incredible. It's just in your face. This had to have been planned. Had to have been.
Well, somebody yanked his leash, said, and you need to understand, the people who are pushing for this next war, in their view, they no longer have a choice. They've gone way too far down this road to quit and turn around without imploding the United States of America's economy. And so they're thinking, we may not succeed, but, we dare not allow ourselves to fail, and they're just going to keep on moving. The ultimate goal is a war against the ruble and the yuan. And they're risking the incineration of the surface of planet Earth in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper we're all going to be using for the next 100 years.
Well, I'll be giving people a heads up that if they want to keep that page open, they can. I've already put you on that page, by the way, as the other Michael that that this is my favorite, the other Michael. And if I haven't found a good Facebook page where they're posting your latest shows, I'll get that done tonight for you. Because as far as I'm concerned, I've done radio myself. I know how hard it is. You're just amazing. Well, I've done 3-hour shows. I know how hard it is. You're amazing.
Well, thank you very much here, but you need to understand that I've been informed by several people that searching for me or what really happened on Facebook does not get results. We're being blocked on there. I know that there are some YouTube channels that are out there that cover my show, and Facebook right now is going through a big stink in that they closed down a whole bunch of obviously fake accounts only to discover that these accounts were being set up to puff up various corporate media entities, and apparently the one that took the biggest hit was USA Today, because when they shut down these obviously fake accounts, USA Today lost a whole huge number of their followers. And so there's a lot of fraud going on in the corporate social media to make the corporate media look better than it really is. Remember, we talked about a month ago where all the major newspapers were caught using Chinese botnets to artificially inflate the clicks on their website to make it look like they're still relevant. And in the process, they're cheating their advertisers by saying, look at all these people reading the site. We're going to charge you thus and such money. Anyway, Chuck, we're going to let you go. And thank you very much for the phone call and the kind thoughts here. And we're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a bit because I got a bunch of news to get to. Dan in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Just wanted to talk about the Boston bombing. I know you had posted some articles and videos yesterday on the anniversary. There was one of the victims, or alleged victims. Her name was Adrienne Hazlitt Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday she was saying, oh, they put the wreath 20 feet too far away from the actual site. And she made this big stink. And it just comes across as one of these crisis actresses. And I was thinking to myself, I studied the Boston bombing back when it first happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like I'm wondering how they could possibly fool all these people, if it was crisis actors. Then I see this video yesterday where they completely controlled the triage unit.
Yeah.
The
fact of the matter is they didn't fool everybody. They like to pretend that they did, but they didn't. Anyway, Dan, I need to take a break for commercials. Do not hang up. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Dan up in Canada. We're talking about the Boston bombing and the reality that while the government and the corporate media are still pretending that they have succeeded in bamboozling the American people, the reality is they have not. And a good example of this goes all the way back to the assassination of John F. Kennedy, where they did succeed in fooling the vast majority of the American people, and those who had information that pointed in a different direction did not have the means to get that information out. And it took about 30 years to reach a point where polls showed half of Americans knew the Warren Report was a complete fiction. Well, today in the age of the Internet and the independent media, the life expectancy of a government lie can be clocked with an egg timer. And there's a lot of the deep state, the old career politicians, the fossils still occupying management at CIA and FBI and NSA that still don't understand the fundamental change to the flow of information in our society. Dan?
Yes, it took 12 years for people to see the Zapruder film. And now we have the Internet.
Yes, we do. And again, the government and the corporate media have not succeeded in fooling us that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. They did not succeed in convincing us Assad was gassing his own people in 2013 and 2014 and the 4th of this month. But all they know how to do is lie, because the U.S. government has gotten by with lies, fraud, and deception for so long, they don't actually know any other way to run a country. And that is another reason why I am foreseeing a Soviet Union-style collapse in the future for Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Going back to the Boston bombing, so this woman who apparently had her leg amputated was at the spot where some 12 feet away, styrofoam cups weren't even blown off of the patio. And there was also a double-paned glass window right in front of the explosion, but only one of the glass panes broke. So I'm wondering how, I've been to a KISS concert and I've seen these pyrotechnics explosions, and they're pretty impressive. I mean, you'd be scared, to have the bovine excrement come out of you. And I just don't buy this whole story.
Well, the funny thing is, I was actually doing my radio show right here, and I was watching TV right when it first happened. And the first time I saw the video of the explosion, it looked like a smoke effect from a movie set to me, rather than a real high-bristive explosion. And it looks like some of these crisis actors are people who have lost limbs earlier in life, and they were done up with makeup to make it look like it was more horrific. And there are a couple of photos and videos out there where they slip up and show that, you know, the wounded limbs are actually artificial. And again, there were two different locations for explosions, so I don't know why she's saying the wreath is in the wrong place. Anyway, Dan, got to let you go. Got to do station identification. We're going to close the phones for a bit. Got a lot more news I need to get to today. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. Look, phone lines are closed right now because I've got a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot going on out there. Now, apparently, Senator John McCain is meeting with Iranian dissidents. Now, they're all in Albania at the moment. But he's out there with his photo op and talking about someday Iran will be free. And we've seen this before. This is the beginning of a new Maidan, a new color revolution, a new regime change. From John McCain, who never met a war he didn't like, except the one he crashed all those planes in. And I'd like to remind everybody that John McCain's actual job is supposed to be Arizona. He's going around, gets his picture taken with the ISIS leadership, and now we find out the U.S. is supporting ISIS again. And they still have their sights on Iran. Oh, Iran is evil, Iran is bad. Iran has not launched, has not initiated a war of conquest against another nation in over 200 years. And again, the government and the corporate media have failed to convince Americans that we are under threat from Iran because someday they may build a nuclear weapon. But the same logic applies to them that applies to North Korea. Even if they had a nuclear weapon, even if Saddam had had a nuclear weapon, all they could do is march it down the street in a parade, like they just had in North Korea, or put it in a museum. No nation is going to carry out an unprovoked attack on the United States of America because of our nuclear deterrent. It's ridiculous to portray Iran as a threat. The reason Iran is in the crosshairs, a couple of different reasons. Like I said, assassinations and wars never happen for just one reason. Iran still has a state central bank. They do not allow private central banking. And, of course, they are a regional power that stands up to Israel. And Israel wants all these countries broken into little tiny pieces that can be bullied and pushed around. Now, earlier we were talking about this Booga Booga scare campaign that North Korea has agents in all 50 states with biological weapons, blah, 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 and trying to ramp up the fear, which may signal yet another false flag attack. The Department of Homeland Security is saying the FBI is now following Islamic terror groups in all 50 states, and that the threat has reached an all-time high. Gee, wasn't that open borders thing a really, really good idea? Again, fear is used to control you. Disasters are used to control you. Tragedies are used to control you. We have a government that controls you through lies, fraud, and deception because they don't know any other way. There is no other way because what the people in the government want is not what the American people want. Now, apparently, Russian bombers flew near Alaska. They were in international airspace, but the U.S. is saying that they flew into the American identification zone, the air defense identification zone of the United States, which doesn't have any bearing in international law. So they sent up 2 F-22s and an E-3 airborne early warning plane to fly alongside the bombers, and they flew side by side for about 12 minutes before the bombers headed back out to the ocean. And the bombers were flying 280 miles southwest of Elmendorf Air Force Base. At one point, they came within 100 miles of Kodiak Island, but again, they were in international airspace. I think the Russians are keeping an eye on the United States, just like the United States is keeping an eye on Russia, or they may be probing America's air defenses. The closer you get to war, the more you see that. Nations will start sending forces really close to each other to see how the other side reacts, how quickly they react. Now, Donald Trump has deployed 6 F-35A Lightning stealth fighters to the Royal Air Force Lakenheath base in Suffolk to face off with Russian aggression. Now, at this point, I'm not seeing any Russian MiGs or Sukhois deploying to Canada to deter American aggression. And so when you hear this term, aggression, 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 just keep in mind who is parking their military off of other people's borders. Because it isn't Russia. I know you don't like to hear this, but in this world war, the United States are the bad guys. Now, apparently, not everybody in Great Britain is happy about the U.S. forces coming on over. And it's not just because of the escalation toward a potential war. Apparently, 2 U.S. Air Force F-15s were hot-dogging near the ground. In fact, the pilots basically described as they were just joyriding. And apparently they flew low over some farmland and terrified some horses to the point where they were so panicked they had to be put down. So that's not going to win any friends over there. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. They just did a poll over in Russia by the state-run public opinion research center Vitsium, and basically almost a third of Russians see a real possibility of war with the United States. 14% of Russians believe the war is already underway in a very low-intensity form of conflict. Certainly, the attempted oil price war is a form of warfare, economic war. And economic wars are often the midwives of real wars. Now, we're hearing another story, this is coming out of Zero Hedge, that there may be a major Ukrainian offensive against the rebels looming, and that is another flashpoint that could bring us to war with Russia. What a mess of the planet these U.S. neocons have made. It's amazing. Now, a lot of stuff going on over in Turkey following Erdogan's declaration of victory in the referendum. Donald Trump actually congratulated Erdogan. And everybody said, what's going on? I mean, you wanted him to go, now you're congratulating him on becoming a dictator. But there's still an issue regarding some of the votes that put Erdogan over the top, because there's a very specific procedure Turkish elections follow to try and reduce election fraud. When you vote and you show your ID to vote and you get your little ink on the thumb, I don't know if that's what they do there, but they have far more safeguards on their elections than the United States does. And part of the process is the ballots have to be stamped at the voting precinct. And apparently, there's somewhere over 2 million of the ballots that didn't have that stamp. And under Turkish law, they're not legal. But Erdogan is saying they are going to be counted because without those votes, he would have lost the referendum. And to be very honest, I can't imagine any country, any citizen of any country, voting yes on a bill that would get rid of the last vestiges of democracy and parliamentary process and basically turn the ruler into a tyrant. There had to be massive election fraud. Nobody's that dumb. So, very interesting article that came out of Deviant Investor. When will they ever learn? And it starts out with some references to some 60s music, but the real meat of the article is 50 years ago we were bombing North Vietnam back into the Stone Age. That worked out well for the military contractors, killed a lot of people, raised prices and taxes on the American people. 25 years ago, we were fighting Iraq and Saddam Hussein. That worked out well for the military contractors, killed a lot of people, and raised prices and taxes for the American people. 10 years ago, we were fighting again in Iraq. That worked out well for the military contractors, killed a lot of people, and raised prices and taxes for the American people. Today, we are still fighting in the Middle East and bombing Syria. Who benefits from all the wars? The military contractors and their investors. And if you look at the stock market, companies like Raytheon, who make the Tomahawk, their stock is going up. War is good business if your business is war. If your business isn't war, it's a bad thing. Now, surprisingly, there is a growing pushback against Jared Kushner. And the issue is, first of all, that he seems to have staged a palace coup against President Trump. But more to the point, he is still refusing to reveal his foreign connections. And so a group of lawmakers are saying his security clearance should be revoked, at which point he would no longer be eligible to be working inside the White House. A lot of people have been very, very critical of Jared and who his foreign entanglements are. But interestingly enough, the corporate media is still trying to cover for him. We had that story a while back where the reporters at one of the big newspapers were being told by management, do not write anything negative about Jared Kushner. He's somebody's asset in place inside the White House, and it's not the American people. Now then, interesting little revelation by Dr. Eric Karlstrom. Not too long ago, it came on out, courtesy of WikiLeaks, that the CIA had set up their own parallel operation mirroring the NSA's Total Information Awareness, Total Surveillance Program. Hideous waste of money to have two people doing exactly the same job. Dr. Karlstrom has revealed that back in the 1960s, at the height of the FBI's abusive COINTELPRO program, the CIA set up one of their own for domestic surveillance and operation, even though the CIA is forbidden by law from carrying out intelligence operations inside the United States. The FBI is supposed to be internal security, the CIA is supposed to be outside the country. And they're both constantly crossing into each other's domains, jurisdictions. There's all kinds of turf wars going on. Now, COINTELPRO was a violation of the Bill of Rights. What COINTELPRO was doing, what the FBI was doing, dirty tricks, outright criminal activity. When it was finally leaked to the public, it almost delegitimized the government. And now we find out the CIA was doing exactly the same thing, and we only learned about it just now. So what else is going on in those back rooms that we, the American people, who are expected to pay for it all and obey all the dictums, what's going on in our name? It's a lot of corruption out there, and I think one thing that illustrates that, it has come on out that Susan Rice, despite being a career politician who at most made a $172,000 per year salary, has accumulated a personal wealth of $50 million, which raises the question, was Susan Rice, like the Clintons, using their government position to make money? And are they not all? Look how many millionaires you have in Congress who were not millionaires when they got elected to Congress. Now, we're getting word that Huma Abedin is about to sell a tell-all memoir. Her asking price is $2 million. And I don't know how much is going to be in there, but I can imagine that Huma Abedin is probably going to be staying out of suburban Washington, D.C. parks and small aircraft until the actual book signings here. Now, getting on back to the issue of election fraud, which has been raised by multiple stories today. Over in Nevada, the Secretary of State for Nevada has revealed that the Nevada Department of Motor Vehicles was instructing their employees to register non-citizens to vote. Nevada has a motor voter law where when you apply for your driver's license, you are registered to vote. But that's only supposed to apply to U.S. citizens or legal residents. And now we're finding out the Nevada DMV was instructing their employees to go ahead and register non-citizens to vote. Now, over in St. Paul, Minnesota, they had a recent election that gave a union huge amounts of money. This was a labor relations deal. And this was about the Service Employees International Union. And now they're looking into massive election fraud in that election. Election fraud is not confined to presidents or members of Congress. And now they're calling for a complete re-examination of all the ballots, look for forgeries. So election fraud is a reality. The election system, as it is currently constituted, cannot be trusted. Now, down in Georgia, they had a special election to fill a vacant congressional seat, and apparently these key electronic voter logs, which recorded the votes, were just swiped from the back of a pickup truck of a poll worker. The guy went to a grocery store, and for some reason, the voter logs were just sitting in the back of the truck, exposed, and they were stolen. Kind of reminds me of how the negatives of Robert F. Kennedy's assassination were stolen when they were on the verge of being returned to the photographer who took them. Now, there's a story coming out of Government Slaves where Hillary Clinton is saying that the 2016 election was my last race. I would certainly like it to be true. Of course, we know that Bill and Hillary are starting to polish up Chelsea for a run for Congress and then for the White House. We have these two dynastic ruling families in this country, the Clintons and the Bushes. And their dream is for the White House to belong solely to them, to pass it off back and forth. Last year's election was supposed to be a Bush-Clinton race. To keep the good times rolling, to keep the cocaine flowing. Now, the other day we were talking about this article that appeared over at the Huffington Post. And it basically came on out trying to make a case on how white men should be denied the right to vote for 20 years to compensate for all the evil that they do to our society. And the Huffington Post, an editor at the Huffington Post, even wrote another article praising this feminist theory. Then they found out that the supposed author of the original article was a fiction, was completely made up. Somebody trolled Huffington Post. They wrote up this piece of nonsense, and Huffington Post went with it. Amazing. Now, BBC is still out there trying to push the story that Assad gassed his own people in Idlib. And they're trying to counter the common sense argument that Assad had nothing to gain from gassing civilians in Idlib, but the rebels did. And so the BBC is literally out there trying to sell the idea that the moderate rebels would never blow up children. They're not like that. Assad would do it. He's evil. But the moderate rebels, they're fighting for freedom and light and whatever the Syrian equivalent of mom apple pie in the flag is. It must be nice to have a network that's paid for by the public, mandatory television tax. You can say whatever you want and nothing ever happens. Remember when the BBC reported on the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 more than 20 minutes before it actually happened? And then people went back and said, let's see those raw videotapes and find out what went on. And BBC said, we just threw them away. And anybody who's ever worked in broadcast news knows you never throw away the original tapes of any world-changing event because those are a gold mine. You will be making money licensing copies of those for decades to come. And BBC said, we have no explanation. We threw out the raw tapes. It's just one of those things. Stop thinking too much. If you're a loyal citizen, if you're a loyal subject to the crown, you will stop thinking. Maybe it's time to have their brains surgically removed. They're of no use to us while they have a brain. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And somebody just sent me screen caps of Michael Savage's Twitter account from a year ago, where he was saying he was supporting Donald Trump and saying we need somebody who's going to run the country like a business and not like an empire, coupled with his current Twitter feed where he's out there saying, yes, an empire would be a good thing. So, yeah, he got turned around real quick here. Somebody did an analysis of the various search engines. And if you use a lot of search engines, you probably realize that there is a feature called autocomplete, where you will start to type something into the search window, and it will provide a pull-down of possible things that you might want to click on and save the typing time. And that list normally is based on what other people are searching for at that time. So you're getting the most common searches in that category. And over at Investment Watch blog, they had this story where somebody went back and did an analysis of Google, Yahoo, and Bing, and they found out that if you typed in the word Hillary on Yahoo and Bing, you would get all the selections like, did she sell secrets, is she a murderer, is she corrupt, and so forth. But on Google, all of the provided suggestions were positive. Hillary is whatever. And so, again, we're seeing the social media platforms are becoming just as controlled and corrupted as the corporate media. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to say I completely agree. I think that white men should have their vote taken away, their right to vote taken away for 20 years.
I hope you're joking.
No, I mean, if they're willing to give it up, I think it should be taken away.
Well, I'm not willing to give it up. I know our votes don't really count all that much, but I mean, can you imagine what would happen if somebody came on out and said we should take women's right to vote away because they're emotional and they're getting all this other stuff, or take away the right to vote from blacks or Hispanics? The article really was absurd, and that's why we all reacted to it. But the issue was the article was a hoax, and Huffington Post actually went with it, showing just how liberal they have become.
Right. Well, you know, it's like this guy with Oathkeeper, Stuart Rhodes. Now, he's a Yale-educated attorney, military veteran, all that, real smart guy, articulate and everything, but, you know, his main concern is fashion. You know, he wants to be fashionable. He goes out there, and when he realizes that there might be some people associated with, you know, quote-unquote white nationalism or something, his main concern is he's got to get out there and let people know, look, you know, we don't care about white rights, you know, because, you know, I mean, the way I look at it, if white people don't look up for their own rights, for their own interests, who else is going to? No one.
Well,
but,
I don't want to encourage any more factionalism and splitting within our society. But on the other hand, there is no question that somebody is trying to stir up an anti-white sentiment in our population. We know that the feminists going all the way back to the 1990s have been pushing an anti-male agenda. We know that the more militant of the LGBT community has been pushing a campaign against what they call the breeders, meaning the straights. And now, of course, we're seeing this Black Lives Matter, pushing this campaign against white people. So where it all overlaps is on the straight white males. And all of a sudden we've been declared a target, and the fact that Huffington Post would even run an article this absurd shows us that again, they're trying to use the divide and conquer to keep us confused and at war with each other. Anyway, Frank, I got to let you go. We're on the verge of another commercial break. And in the remaining time here, apparently, interesting story. When CNN was broadcasting from the White House Easter egg roll, a kid ran behind the talking heads and appears to say fake news. So that was kind of fun. All right, getting into the economic news. And the news is not looking all that good Story coming out of RINF.com. The Trump White House is taking marching orders from hundreds of CEOs, and maybe one of the reasons that the White House does not want the visitor logs to get out is how many corporate executives have been having meetings with Donald Trump. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Karen in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, I have a few questions for you. Hi there. Do you have any alternatives to Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter? And do you suggest that we stay off those sites if there are alternatives? That's question number one.
Well, I recommend for search engines DuckDuckGo or Yandex.
Would you spell that, please?
Well, actually, if you go to my website and look in the left margin, there are links to all of those. You can just click on that, go on in, and sign on up. To replace Facebook, there is Scene Life, and to replace Twitter, there is Gab, and there's also another Facebook replacement is called VK, and I'm posting a lot of material to those right now. And so far, I'm not seeing any indications of censorship. And they are gaining in users and popularity because people do not want to go to a social media platform that arrogantly says, we will decide for you what you're thinking, seeing, hearing, and reading, because we've had enough of that nonsense from the regular corporate media.
So all of these sites, there are links to, obvious links to on your site.
In the left margin, the left margin sidebar, you will see a whole row of these little icons that show Scene Life, Gab, VK, Yandex, and DuckDuckGo. It's
okay,
right.
Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go. Now then, getting on back to the news here, we're talking about the economy. We're talking about how Donald Trump has had an endless string of corporate executives, Wall Street people, marching in and out of the White House. And we are beginning to see indications that Donald Trump's economic and tax policy, like so much else, is diverging rapidly from his campaign rhetoric. Now, when Donald Trump won his election, gold actually dropped because everybody thought Donald Trump is going to fix the economy, the dollar's going to go up, and the investing market is going to be really, really good, and it hasn't materialized. And so gold has now erased its post-election decline and appears to be heading up again. Now, there was a little profit-taking on Friday, and we know that the bankers and the equities dealers are still trying to find some way to keep those prices down low. But they're not going to be able to do it forever. And again, I strongly recommend, if you have surplus cash that you can invest, you get it in silver and gold. Silver's actually been outperforming gold, but you should have them both under your own control. Do not buy those paper contracts. They are leveraged hundreds to one, and when there is a run on the metals, and sooner or later there will be, most of the people holding those paper contracts, that's all they're going to be left with, paper contracts. What you want is something of value, tangible, inherent value under your control. That is the first step back to economic freedom. That's the way the country actually started. Because when the United States was created, gold and silver coins were the money. Now, the paper notes were just claim checks. And stamped on the front of them was the little message. You can take this paper note to the bank and exchange it for its face value in lawful money. And the lawful money meant the silver and gold coinage. And once that silver and gold was in your pocket, there wasn't anything the government or the bankers could do to change its value. That was economic freedom. And you could spend it wherever you want or not spend it. And you could go through your entire life without ever having to go into a bank. Today, it's completely different. We're back in the system that led to the American Revolution. We're being forced to be dependent on paper notes created out of thin air and loaned at interest by a private central bank. And now they're pushing for the cashless society. where you're not allowed to have anything in your pocket of your wealth. It must be in the bank. The bankers must be allowed to hold your money for you. We'll give you an allowance every once in a while. And the IMF has come on out and admitted once they accomplish a cashless society, they're going to go into negative interest rates on all savings accounts. You want to know the best way in the world to be a bank robber? Own the bank. Now, here's an article. It's over in Post News D2, how the U.S. government is approaching $20 trillion in debt. And I remember just back in the 1990s when the U.S. government was $5 trillion in debt. There was actually an attempt to get a constitutional resolution passed in 3/4 of the states, saying that when the national debt goes over $6 trillion, the federal government is dissolved. And unfortunately, they couldn't get enough states to sign on to that. And now we're at $20 trillion in debt. And a big part of that debt, of course, is the military spending. Now, you've probably been told thus and such out of your tax dollars goes into the military, but a lot of that is actually hidden and spread on out. We know a lot of the black budget gets buried in the budgets of other departments, which explains why they absorb so much money and provide so little service. But when you take the spending for weapons development, spending for the wars, the spending for the veterans' benefits, which is a lot even though they're being treated very poorly, it comes up to almost half of the entire gross domestic product is geared toward war. And that is another indicator that we're heading toward a Soviet Union-style collapse. Because toward the end, the Soviet Union was overspending and overspending on military development to deter American aggression, and they bankrupted themselves. And we're headed exactly the same way. There is no way to pay this debt off ever, because it all came out of that private central bank. And any new money coming out of that private central bank is just another loan at interest. That is the trap of private central banking. Once that first pretty printed piece of paper goes into circulation, more money is owed to that private central bank than actually exists, and that's why an enslaved population can never get out of debt. The system either has to collapse, or you have to have a ruler who is strong enough to nationalize or shut down that bank, the way Andrew Jackson did. And that's another one of the reasons why they're rushing to war. They're hoping if they can get a world war going, you'll forget about the economic hardship. They'll have something to blame. Yes, the American people are starving and homeless and hungry and everything's in horrible condition, but it's the war, you know. It's because of the war. Don't even think that it had anything to do with fiscal mismanagement and a predatory private central bank. It's the war. It's the fault of the Russians and the Chinese. You hate them, not us. Now, Puerto Rico is looking like it is going to have to declare bankruptcy. They have a deadline this coming May 1st to restructure $70 billion in debt. And anyone betting on returns from the island's widely held U.S. municipal bonds, they're starting to get very nervous and twitchy. Everybody's hovering on the edge of bankruptcy. The U.S. itself, Puerto Rico, certainly Venezuela. They're having troops in the streets now to deal with that. And that is because private central banking is inherently unstable. Because, by design, it produces more debt than money with which to pay that debt until the debt crushes the system. And that is why, following the coming global crash, I would hope that every single nation, as they rebuild, outlaw private central banking and go back to a government providing its own money interest-free to support commerce. Now, WikiLeaks is releasing a lot of information from the Vault 7 documents, and apparently they have found indications that CIA can't hack into the Bitcoin system. So those spooks are just about everywhere, poking their nose where it really doesn't belong. Martin Armstrong was out there saying that the elite are going to do whatever it takes to prevent the UK leaving the European Union. And apparently Theresa May has surprised everybody by calling for a general election on the 8th of June of this year in order to try and get some of the remainers out of the Parliament and the government, because they're still trying to mount demands for a second referendum or delay or all this other stuff. They're going along with ridiculous demands from Brussels. Unfortunately, remember how hard they worked to try and rig the Brexit vote. They're going to rig the June 8th election to get the Brexiteers out and keep the Remainers back in. Because rulers and tyrants, money junkies, they believe it's their divine right to play dirty. And they will at every opportunity here. Now, it still may come to naught because the latest polls in Italy and Sweden have the Eurosceptics in the lead. Now, we know Marine Le Pen is a Eurosceptic. Polls are showing her in the lead. Her campaign office was burned by her opponents. And now, of course, there's this very unfortunate circumstance. It's a computer goof where 500,000 French citizens have received duplicate polling cards, which means they could cast 2 votes. And French authorities are saying, yes, there is a problem, and 500,000 extra votes could take the election away from Marine Le Pen, but we can't investigate until after the election is over. Because if Marine Le Pen loses the election, there will be no investigation. That's kind of how these things tend to work on out. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Jeff in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I was looking at some website, and it says that 2 of Trey Gowdy's investigators, federal, investigators, or something like that, have disappeared. Their car was found abandoned in a rest area in Little Rock, Kansas, or Arkansas.
Well, I haven't seen that yet. Could you send me that URL?
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just playing around. It was a site that I don't really look at much. Let me see if I can find it here. Let's go back here.
Do you remember the name of the
Free
site?
The Free Thought Project.
Okay, if you will send me that URL, I'd like to look into it. But we need to be aware right now that a lot of nonsensical stuff is being put out in the independent media to trip them up, to make them look less credible. There literally is a war going on between the corporate media and the independent media, so we have to be very, very careful. A few weeks ago, they were out there saying that Trey Gowdy had exhumed the body of Vince Foster, and that story was a hoax as well. But I would imagine that if something had happened to Trey Gowdy's investigators, he'd be on the news right now screaming about it. So I want to take a look at the story and see where it's sourced from.
And then are any of these other, new alternative websites, do they support like videos like YouTube where the person like you would get money out of the deal, or are we all getting squeezed out?
Well, the independent social media, let's call it that, the independent social media, Scene Life, VK, Gab, and the rest of it, there is no monetization available. But obviously, I'm not doing what I do here to become rich, and I succeeded at that. So I put the videos out, and when YouTube banned monetization on my videos on YouTube, I shrugged my shoulders because that wasn't why I was doing what I was doing. But the advantage of these other platforms is that so far they seem to have been following the principle of freedom of expression. And that's why I'm recommending going to them and abandoning Facebook and YouTube and Google. The unholy trinity.
See, like, I'm a cab driver and I want to look up an address on Google Maps, right?
Yes.
I don't want to see where I can have tea by, this hotel. I want to see the directions to the hotel on the freeway, or to... I think there is a way to turn off
the little automatic ads. Obviously, if you put in a search term for restaurant, you'll get that popped up. One thing to be very careful about Google Maps is that a lot of the business locations that seem to be near you are actually fraudulent. When you call the number, the call goes to a call center that maintains contracts with people in your area. They don't actually have a place of business. So you have to be careful about that. But if you don't want to go to Google Maps, I would suggest just getting yourself a nice GPS unit. I recommend the Garmin's very highly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or I got the Apple Maps too, on the phone. But I mean, it's the Google Maps actually were better about a year or two ago. They were easier to use and more made sense.
Yeah, they junked them up a little tiny. They junked them up a little bit, but there are ways to control the layers that are visible. One of my main gripes about Google Maps is that when businesses go out of business, which is happening a lot, they are not taken off the Google Map. And so you'll waste a lot of time searching for something in your area, and you'll call, and you say that number is no longer in operation. You'll call again. That number is no longer in operation. Anyway, Jeff, got to let you go. Good luck with your mapping system. We're coming up here on a commercial break. Now then, interesting little story, and it certainly dovetails with a lot that we've been talking about regarding the real reason for the open borders. There is this radio show host, Josh Tolley, and he was interviewing this lady who was involved in her state's refugee immigration program, and said basically it's more extensive than most people realize, and basically says how the United Nations is planning immigration into the U.S. in order to basically break up our sovereignty at some point in the future. And I've been saying exactly the same thing. There is an attack on our sense of identity, our sense of self. They went after the Confederate flag. Now they're saying wearing red, white, and blue is racist and offensive. People who have a strong source of who they are, where they come from, what their history is, they're very hard to control. People who don't have that are very easy to sway. If you look at the religion of Judaism, it is so important for them to know their history. Or if you look at the Maoris, where everybody literally memorizes the names of the last 30 generations in their family. And that's what's under attack by the New World Order. They want you confused about who you are, confused about what restroom to use. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about still pushing for a one world government, one world private central bank here. Now, as you remember, when Obama was president, he came up with this law that basically was going to force diversity into neighborhoods, to literally mandate that every neighborhood would have so many of these kind of people and so many of that kind of people and so forth and so on. And it really angered a lot of people. And it was called the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, but it was done without regard to the economic realities of certain people. And a lot of individuals were very, very concerned that having worked to build a very nice neighborhood for themselves and their families, that all of a sudden they were being forced to accept individuals who may not fit in, which of course is the whole point, get everybody confused and at each other. Fortunately, legislation has now been introduced in Congress to defund and overturn this bill. In other words, people are going to be allowed to live where they want to live rather than have your domicile decided by the government on the basis of, oh, we need this ethnicity in this neighborhood, therefore you shall live there. Now, another interesting story, an artifact of our open borders, up in Montana, they have started to suspect that the Border Patrol officials up there are working with the drug smugglers, and there's about 40 miles of U.S. border totally unpatrolled. And when I read this, it reminded me of when Claire and I were living in Washington State, because there was an uncontrolled airfield up towards Snoqualmie Pass. And we used to go up there all the to Snoqualmie Pass all the time for the resort there to get the view of Mount Rainier, and we really enjoyed living in Washington State. We had a good time there. But we noticed a couple of times what appeared to be drug flights going in and out of that field. Now, remember that whole situation in Arkansas in the 1980s. The governor of the state, Bill Clinton, kept the law enforcement, drug enforcement people away from the airports being used by the CIA. So it looks like it's not confined to just Arkansas here. Now, for those of you living in California, if you've been worried about the Cal exit, that apparently has now died because negative publicity. Apparently one of the organizers of the Cal exit was linked to Russia, and in the current Russian bashing climate, it worked against the Cal exit petition. Signatures slowed down, and so now the petition drive has been ended. They're not going to make it on the ballot. So if California is ever going to secede, let it go some other time. All right, we're coming up here on our station identification. We'll be right back with a phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we are going to the phones again. John in Louisiana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I was listening to another talk show host on RBN here, and he was being serious now. And you might just tell me it's none of my business, but he named 3 people, and you were one of them. He said it 3 times, and he was being serious. He said you subscribe to the Jewish religion. Is that true?
No. I'm actually an atheist. I have Jewish ancestry in my family. Rivero is a Sephardic name, but we haven't been Jewish since Queen Isabella was very rude to my ancestors in 1492.
Okay, well, I wish I remembered his name, but there's another talk show host on your network that's saying you, and I think he said Alex Jones and somebody else. I don't know who else he said. He said it about 3 times, real serious like. So you might want to check it out.
I really don't care. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I could care less.
All right. Well, he's lying. See, that's.
Well, look, he could just be mistaken, but no. The reality is, I'm an atheist, and I mean, my first wife was Jewish. I've had a lot of Jewish friends, but no, I don't follow any religion. But people get confused when I say that I do have Jewish ancestry on the paternal line of the family.
Oh, I see. Maybe that's what's confused. And Alex Jones' wife, I think she was. So maybe that's what. Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, actually in the Jewish faith, if your wife is Jewish, then you are Jewish. Fortunately, after the divorce,
okay.
I went back to being something else. But I never let them near me with that knife.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much here. All right, now then, more serious note here. I have to confess, I am at a loss over what seems to be an exploding problem of adults having sexual relations with children. Now, maybe it's one of those things that's been going on all along and was just kept hidden. In fact, if you remember that wonderful movie, The Spotlight, where they were talking about this newspaper that wanted to blow open the scandal of Catholic clergy sexually molesting children. Everyone was saying, oh, you can't do that. It's the church. You can't do that. We're all going to go down to the dark regions and burn if you do the story. And maybe it's something that's been going on all along, and we just didn't see it. But again, in the age of the Internet and the independent media, it does seem to be out there. Or maybe it's because more people are taking these prescription antidepressants that interfere with their impulse control. But apparently down in Texas, they've had to investigate 159 cases of educator-student sex. Over 80 cases just since January. 46% of the people were charged with a crime. And there are 2 issues at work there. First of all, when you do something like that to a child, it's more than just the sex. You're stealing their youth from them. You're forcing them to grow up and see the world as it really is. And I think children ought to be allowed to remain children for as long as they can. Because losing your innocence is a one-way street. You don't get to go back. It's like when you were told there's no such thing as Santa Claus. You can't go back to believing it. That's one issue. And the other issue I have is that from my point of view, children are to be taught science to, encouraged in the arts and music, and I don't know what's really going on there, but apparently it's an issue. We were talking yesterday where there's a rumor, and it is a rumor, let's emphasize rumor with a capital room, that the reason Donald Trump has done his sudden 180 is that when he was down at Jeff Epstein's little pleasure palace in the Caribbean, he got caught on videotape doing something really icky, and they're saying, go along with the war agenda or we'll just broadcast this all over the corporate media. And I have to wonder at how anybody, first of all, getting over the idea that they're even engaging in that kind of behavior, going down to Epstein's Island knowing that it just has to be wired with microphones and cameras everywhere. And you look at all the people who have gone down there, like Trump and Bill Clinton and one of the princes, I forget which one, and I don't really care. And then there's that issue of being an educator or a teacher, which is a position of trust. And by engaging in that behavior, you're betraying that trust. When you're an educator, you're there to educate. And that's your job, and you shouldn't be doing anything else. So, like I said, maybe it's because more and more people are on these prescription antidepressants. And because there is an issue there, but it's being covered up like vaccine damage and GMO damage and the rest of it here. Now, here's a positive story. This is happening over in Arkansas. There was a case where a police officer shot and killed an unarmed teenager, 15-year-old boy, back in 2012. And the family took the case to court, and the court ruled that the police officer himself is personally, financially liable for the $415,000 settlement. And I think it's high time. It's a wonderful precedent. Because up until recently, police would go on out and they shoot a dog and they shoot a kid and they flashbang a baby or they tase somebody to death. There's a lawsuit. The taxpayers are forced to pay for it. And the cops are just free to go on behaving the way they are. And this has set a legal precedent where those who are wrongfully harmed by the police can cite this case as a precedent saying you make that officer personally liable. Now, for those who just want the money, they're going to go along with suing whoever's got the money, which is going to be the government and the taxpayer. But for those who genuinely want to rein in abusive police, now they have a court precedent that says you, the police officer who did this, are civilly liable, not the taxpayer. So I think if this starts to spread, if cops know that they can be held personally, financially liable, they're not going to be quite so ready to pull the trigger without making sure their target is a real threat, and that is a good thing. Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Well, United Airlines can breathe a sigh of relief. They're out of the abuse of passengers' limelight, at least for the moment. Apparently, EasyJet forced a couple off of an overbooked flight with no compensation. Just said, we're sorry, we don't have seats for you. We oversold the flight. And the two passengers were on their way to Italy, where they had non-refundable accommodations. They had to arrive on that EasyJet flight, go to their accommodations, have their vacation, come home. And EasyJet basically said to this couple that the next flight to Italy was 4 days later. And so this couple, in addition to not getting compensation for being kicked off the EasyJet flight, are paying for accommodations in Italy they're not using. And you're going to see this kind of abuse of people by corporations when you live under fascism. And that is just an absolute reality. It's an indicator of how weak the American people are against the dynamic duo of government authority and corporate greed. Now then, if you're anywhere near Squaw Valley, the ski resort, it's near Lake Tahoe. Boy, have I got good news for you. They got so much snow this last winter, Squaw Valley is expecting they're going to stay open all year. Normally, during the summer months, the snow would melt, and they'd have to shut down because it's really rough on the skis to ski down a mountain of rock. But they've got so much snow, they're saying they're probably going to be able to stay open the entire year. Same thing over at Alpine Meadows. Snow everywhere. And same good news for skiers down south of the equator in New Zealand and Australia. Their ski resorts are opening early. It's still their autumn. They're not quite into winter, and the snow is already piling on up. Boy, remember back in 2000 when the UK Independent ran that banner headline, "Snowfalls are now a thing of the past because Al Gore and the carbon Nazis are saying so." So we get this story out of 12160 where policy advisors are now urging Donald Trump to keep the U.S. in the Paris Accord, the climate accord. Now, Donald Trump during his campaign was saying it's nonsense. And it is nonsense. We know it's nonsense. But Trump's advisors, the neocons, are saying, no, you stay in that accord because a global climate authority is one of the foundations of the coming New World Order global government. The New World Order is founded on 3 pillars. One is human-caused global warming require surrendering of sovereignty to a global environmental authority. The second pillar was a global pandemic requiring the surrendering of your sovereignty to a global health authority. They tried that in 2009 with the When Pigs Fly flu, which fizzled because the When Pigs Fly flu turned out to be less severe than the normal seasonal flu. And the third pillar was a global financial crash requiring surrendering your sovereignty to a global private central bank. That one does seem to still be on track. But Trump's aides are out there saying, no, you go along with global warming, go along with the peace accord. But now we're getting an update on the story where apparently the Trump aides just abruptly postponed that meeting on whether they were going to stay in the Paris climate deal. Now, Donald Trump pledged to cancel the U.S. participation in that agreement, and maybe he finally decided to show a little backbone and say, I got to keep at least some of my campaign promises or I'm going to be a one-term president. Now, we've been talking a lot about gender identity and it being one of the areas where the New World Order is trying to get us to forget who we are, along with get rid of the Confederate flag, stop wearing red, white, and blue, blurring all the populations together. And as I jokingly refer to, making us confused as to which bathroom we should be using. And it's being imposed. It's almost being made fashionable to be transgender. The corporate media is making stars out of people. There's a new Dove commercial with a transgender mother in there. They're becoming stars. It's like something you should want to be. And so we're looking at this article out of Government Slaves where there is a gender clinic, and their psychiatrist is saying that most children who claim to identify as transgender are just faking it because of the social pressures. Anyway, let's talk about computers. We were talking the other day about how Congress has basically ended internet privacy and has allowed ISPs to sell your browsing data to whoever wants it. Advertising companies, research companies, blackmailing organizations, whatever. It's for sale. They can have it. And apparently, there's been a big pushback. We do want a certain amount of privacy. And Wisconsin Representative Jim Sensenbrenner came on out and said that we shouldn't worry about privacy on the Internet because nobody has to use the Internet. If you want to be private, just stop using the Internet. And that really sets a new standard for idiocy, because that's like saying killing privacy is fine because nobody has to use the telephone. I'm sorry, in the 21st century, the Internet has become indispensable to our lives and our businesses. And it should have the same privacy rules as the telephone. It is a crime to tap a phone line and listen to other people's conversations. In many states, it's a crime to record a phone conversation, even if one person knows it's being recorded. But no privacy on the Internet. Are they trying to kill the Internet off? Maybe. But that was a dumb thing to say. You could take it to even more absurd things. There shouldn't be any private, if you want privacy, don't write letters to people. You don't have to use the post office. That's how ridiculous this is. And we do have a right to privacy, from the government at least in the Fourth Amendment. Now, a lot of corporations will abuse the American people under the excuse that the Bill of Rights only constrains the government, and they, private businesses, are allowed to do things the government is not, which is why the government uses so many private companies as contractors to engage in operations that would be forbidden to the United States government under that Bill of Rights. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Facebook announced last Friday that the company had discovered and dismantled a network of fake accounts that had been rising on Facebook over the last 6 months. And basically, they shut all these down and discovered that these accounts were being used to artificially inflate the follower numbers of, among other things, corporate media. And one of the ones that was hit worst was USA Today. And it caused tremendous damage. So, let's see. USA Today lost 5 million followers from its primary Facebook page. 5 million followers. They're cheating. Remember about a month ago, we reported on how it had come on out that the websites of major corporate media were using Chinese botnets to send clicks to their website, to run up their readership numbers, to look relevant. And along the way, of course, they're defrauding their investors. Look, we've got 16 gazillion readers and our ad rates are thus and such. And they're lying and cheating. It's almost like cheating has become socially acceptable, like it's now an accepted part of the American character. And I think that's a loss. Because I grew up in an age where when you said, I am an American, it carried with it certain implicit qualities, including honesty, truthfulness, ethics, morality. And those have all seemed to be chipped away bit by bit in this mad rush for bigger and bigger piles of paper with colored ink all over it. And it is a loss. In many ways, the United States that I thought I knew as a child is already dying. It's a failing empire. Now, there is a new phishing attack out, and it is really very difficult. If you get a security patch on your browser, you might want to install it. In fact, I got hit with this one the other day, and they didn't get anything because there's nothing on this machine to get, but it did mess up my machine. I had to do a complete power down, power up to get it all back. This is affecting Chrome, Firefox, and Opera. And the way the phishing attack works is they can redirect you to a bogus URL, but up in the title bar of the browser, you see the domain of a known and recognized website, like Apple, Google, eBay, and others. But you're actually going to a bogus URL where they're carrying out the phishing attack. This is a nasty, nasty system. And hopefully the security experts are going to be able to find a way to plug this one. Meanwhile, I have a solution to all this cybercrime and hacking. We find one cyber criminal, And we crucify them live on national TV or streaming video feed. And if they're in reasonable health, it'll take them a week to die. And I think you do that once, and a lot of this cybercrime is going to kind of start fading away. Not the nation-state stuff, of course, but the script kiddies in the basement of their parents' home with these hacker toolkits that are available on the dark web. That might tone down just a little tiny bit. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. The phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443, and we will be back after these following commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And following on this new phishing attack, the way it works, and apparently the methodology has been known going all the way back to 2001, is that some letters in other languages are different in terms of their ASCII code, but look identical to English letters. And so these phony domains may look like something in English, but include characters that are actually in a different language and have a different code. So just looking at them, it looks like you're at apple.com, but you're actually looking at a different domain that is taking you to a website that is made to look like apple.com, but is used to plant malware. So that's basically how that is working. Now, apparently, vCenter, the home application, is sending back customer improvement data. In the process, it's opened a remote code execution hole whereby hackers can go on into your home over the net and start playing with your Internet of Things devices. Personally, I think the Internet of Things is a fad, and it will not last. I certainly don't need a networked computer inside my coffee maker. In fact, I don't even have a computer in the coffee maker anymore. I have a coffee press. Yes, this room I'm sitting in is all high-tech and computers, and I love my Raspberry Pi and everything, but once I walk out of here, I want my life simple, borderline Luddite. I don't need everything to be computerized. Just something to keep in mind here. Apparently, somebody's out there actually selling ransomware code for $175 just to inflict that. Okay, a while back, I talked about this big scandal in a school district back on the East Coast where the school was issuing laptops to their students, and the laptops had built-in webcams, and the laptops came with software installed that allowed school administrators to access the laptops in the home of the student in their bedroom and activate the webcam to spy on them. And when it was discovered, it created a huge outcry. Apparently, an administrator saw a kid in their room doing something and called them on it, at which point the student and the student's parents realized the only way they could have known was the school was spying on the kid in the room. And you know, kids in their rooms, in what they think is a private circumstance, they do all kinds of things that really they would like to hope are being private. And it was a big stink, but apparently nobody has learned any lessons from that. There's another story from Blacklisted News, which says that students, teachers, administrators, and librarians across the country are now being forced to use school-issued tablets and laptops that use educational cloud services that spy on everything. And according to the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Spying on Students reports, more than 30 million students, teachers, and administrators are using Google's education suite of software. It's called G Suite for Education. It's being mandated in all these schools, and it is set up to basically spy on all these people and store the information in the cloud. And by the way, I know in theory the cloud sounds wonderful, but once your data is on the cloud, there's no guarantees about it being read by other people. There's no protection whatsoever. And people are not comfortable with that, which is why more and more of the updated modern personal electronics literally try and force you onto the cloud. And I don't want to do that. I want to take responsibility for my backups here. I don't want to go on the cloud because there's too much of a risk. And it's not that I'm doing anything that's illegal. It's just I do have a strong developed sense of privacy. And so should you. They're trying to convince you right now that people who want privacy are somehow wrong or bad. You must have something to hide. No, we're just private people. It's not the government's business if I bought a jelly donut on the way home from work today. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we've got a caller on the line, Nico in Southern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I called yesterday about peak oil. I had a new question for you.
Sure.
Is there a relationship between, say, like a creditor nation and a debtor nation when they go to war? Is there a history of that? And is there a history of, like, a common result? Say one side generally wins?
I'm not entirely sure of the context of your question, but generally the side that runs out of money first is generally going to be the side that loses. Usually when two countries go to war, it's assumed that all debt obligations are at least temporarily suspended until the conclusion of the war, at which point the loser of the war incurs the war debt. All countries are plunged into debt by war. That's why banks love them. One of the things that happened in World War I was that all the war debt was assigned to Germany. Germany was forced to pay off the war debt of all the participants, even though the war had actually broken out between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. And the goal there was to prevent Germany from rising as a manufacturing and economic power, because that was the main reason Germany had been ultimately made the target of World War I, is other countries like Great Britain couldn't compete with them. They were brilliant mechanical engineers, they had factories, they had machine tools, and they wanted to make sure that Germany couldn't rise and become an economic threat to the world. Eventually Germany did rise when they kicked out their private central bank imposed on them by the Treaty of Versailles. And then, of course, that set the stage for another world war, because the private central bankers just will not tolerate any government creating its own money. But as far as creditor versus debtor nation, basically war kind of wipes the slate clean for the previous debts and imposes new, much larger debts in their place.
Oh, okay. I was thinking that, it looks like we could possibly be picking a fight with China. I think we should be befriending Russia and China so that we could all cooperate on an economic reset. That's just my opinion. But I think a side note there was that I think everybody should listen to or watch or read your article on All Wars Are Bankers' Wars.
Yes.
Earlier you did say that something along the lines of economic strife is the midwife of war. Did you say something like that today?
I said economic war is the midwife of real war.
Well, I think
maybe I should write that down.
Basically, yeah, it was really good, Mike. I wanted to actually tell you to write that down because, with all of the talk and everything lately, I've kind of distilled everything, gone back to the economics, which my degree is in economics.
Okay.
And it seems to me that everything kind of starts there. If you follow the money, you're going to find out why the wars happen.
Yes.
So, I also appreciate what you're doing. I think I want to warn everybody against capitulation, even though I think it's a foregone conclusion that everything is going to fall apart economically. I think it's important that everybody understand why, so that as we do reform the nation, we have as many people as possible understand what the problem was so we can keep it from happening again.
Absolutely.
Or at least stave it off for as long as possible.
Absolutely. But the fact is your average politician would sell their own mother for $1, to quote Aaron Russo. And we fought a revolution to break free of private central banking, and we got sold back into that slavery a little over 100 years ago by a corrupted Congress and a corrupted president. And they don't want to reset. They love a world in which we are all their debt slaves, and they don't want that to go away. They want to complete the plan for the entire planet to be turned into a single plantation full of debt slaves.
I don't think it's going to happen. I think that for a few reasons. One of them,
Hello? I think we just lost Nico there. All right. Moving on here, and we kind of knew this was going to happen. The former Federal Election Commission chairwoman, Ann Rivero, is saying political speech must be controlled on social media. She was doing a speech at UC Berkeley, as if they didn't have enough problems, calling for regulations against what the government and the corporate media are declaring fake news, meaning us, the truth tellers. Because if there's one thing the independent media has succeeded in doing, we have taken away from the government and the corporate media their ability to lie to the American people with impunity. And they absolutely hate that, and they're trying to find some way they can shut it all down without it becoming a First Amendment test case before the Supreme Court. And they're trying to, we're literally at a war between government media and the independent media. And they're trying to go after our advertisers. They're trying to bankrupt us. In some cases, broadcasters and webmasters have been lured and tricked into taking actions which can then be subject to a lawsuit. The other side loves to play dirty. They believe it's their divine right, and we have to be very, very careful. But we're now hearing this idea that the First Amendment should only apply to corporate media. And that's not a new idea either. Back in, I think about 7 years ago, there was actually an attempt to get a court decision saying that freedom of the press and the legal protections for the press should only apply if you had a paycheck from a corporate media outlet. Fortunately, that did not succeed, but that's the way they're thinking. They want Americans to go back to thinking that what comes out of the government spokespeople, what comes out of the corporate media, is automatically the truth, to be believed without question, and any other opinions are automatically declared to be fake news, and you should just ignore it. I mean, they're already starting to propagandize kids in grade school to believe what the corporate media tells them, and to just not go to any of those other websites out there. Now, here's a little up story, and I love this. I love this. Over in Marietta, Georgia, there's a 7th grader was just doing science experiments. And he's been doing science experiments since he was in the 1st grade. Obviously, a brilliant child. Should be encouraged. And he basically did a project that discovered evidence that some of the chemicals in green tea may have the potential to fight cancer. And specifically, he tested, you know something? I can't even pronounce this. Epigallocatechin 3 gallate, EGCG. It's an antioxidant in green tea. And he showed it could prevent tumors in planaria. And that is absolutely amazing. Now, of course, big cancer doesn't like that sort of thing to be out there. They don't want easy, inexpensive cancer cures, especially something you could make in your own home. Oh, no, 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 no. You have to have the chemotherapy. You have to have the radiation. And yes, in the long run, they'll make you even sicker. But it makes us a lot of money, and that's all that really matters here. So you can imagine how understandable we find this story coming out of Natural News, where Stanford medical researchers have issued a warning that women are being conned into having mastectomy surgery by doctors who scare them into the operation with false genetic testing results. Why are they needlessly butchering these poor women? Because it makes money. We're making money. Just slice those things off. I got a payment to make on my Porsche. Now, TV and movies have tried to portray doctors as always saints, always wonderful people deserving of your blind trust, just like TV and movies have portrayed the FBI as the good guys. It's not true. Remember that guy got sent to jail last year? Over the course of his career, he had told his perfectly healthy patients they had cancer to sell them chemotherapy and radiation. And in the process, of course, he made them sick. They were perfectly healthy. Oh, you got to have this. And they got sick. And they threw him in jail. Not for causing the illness, not for causing harm, but because he was caught defrauding Medicare. The money was the crime. Forget about what he did to the people. Who cares about it? We got too many people anyway. Go ahead, give them cancer. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Johnny in the People's Republic of California, what is on your mind?
Hey, Mike, this is Johnny, calling from the People's Republic of California. I was out there at the Martin Luther King Park.
That's in Berkeley.
For the Patriots Day, yes, up in Berkeley for the Patriots Day Free Freedom Rally. And I was wondering if you got my pictures. You asked me to send you pictures, and I think I sent you some video too. But it was
when did you send it?
Yesterday.
I'll have to go back and look. I don't think I saw it, but I'll go back and look. I mean, I get so much email. I get 300-400 emails a day, and I really do try and read them all.
Oh yeah, sure.
But I'll go back and look for emails with attachments.
Okay. Well, I wanted to say that let everybody know that the police again stood down, and whatever side the Antifa, the anti-fascists were on, the police were on the opposite side, or in kicking back into vans. And I was part of the Oathkeeper security team to protect the event from the Antifa coming inside. And very violent. You know, they were throwing M100s, firecrackers, using.
They're using M100s. I heard about the M80s, the M100s. Those you can take somebody's finger off with one of those.
Yeah. Everybody was saying M80s, but they weren't. They were M100s, much bigger.
Yes.
So the other thing too is that going into the rally, they completely disarmed everybody. You couldn't have flagpoles, knives, pepper spray, anything to protect yourself from these people. But no, they didn't take anything away from Antifa. But on the other hand, we kicked their butts and chased them away from the whole area.
You know, the part that really bothers me about this is all they're screaming about these days is Trump's tax return. I mean, when Trump was first elected, they were out there screaming he was going to be Hitler, he was going to do this, he was going to do that. And now that Trump has been brought on board the war agenda, Antifa seems to be screaming about nothing except Donald Trump's tax return. I got to tell you, I would much rather see Hillary's deleted emails than Donald Trump's tax return.
Well, they were all out there, he's racist. And the first question we ask is, name one thing that he's done that is racist. His whole staff that works for him is of every dissent, from his private corporations and as well as his cabinet. I mean, it's ridiculous, and they keep on repeating like parrots. He's racist. I mean, I personally don't agree with everything that he's done, but I went out there for the freedom of speech and to protect freedom of speech. So, I just want to.
I'm wondering why Antifa are still doing this. Are they being funded? Are they being directed? Is George Soros still dreaming of a color revolution here in the United States of America? Because at this point, this many months into the Trump administration, he is the president, good, bad, or indifferent. He's the president. It almost seems like a complete, total waste of time for these people to still be out there screaming. And I have to wonder what their motive is. And again, because so many of these violent groups turn out to be funded by George Soros, is this just more of his games?
Yeah, I certainly believe. They're very well organized.
Yeah,
they're organized by someone, and they have their talking points. It's very, very obvious that they are being directed by someone and they're being protected by the mayor of Berkeley.
Yeah, and that's very alarming. And that's one of the reasons why it does seem like this is somebody's staged operation of some kind. For the police to stay back and let this happen, there's obviously an agenda at work. But good that you pushed them on back, because that means whatever they wanted to accomplish that day, they'd fail to accomplish.
Yeah, I saw that on Reddit that Antifa said they lost the Battle of Berkeley, so they even admit it too.
Oh, well, good.
Which is a good thing.
Good. Absolutely good. I find it amazing that the police were disarming all of the pro-Trump supporters, including things like pepper spray, but the Antifa were allowed to come on in with, what sort of weapons did they have?
Well, there was a perimeter, the plastic holy construction separation, like on sidewalks and stuff.
Yes.
They had that around the perimeter of the area where the Patriots Day free speech rally was. Outside of that, apparently I heard Antifa got a permit to have a picnic there, so they had like 5-6 people sit on a blanket and they just tossed out plates, pretending like, they're doing a picnic or whatever, but there ended up being a couple of hundred Antifa. We were probably 3 to 1 out there. And they, immediately, it wasn't long before they, hit a little plastic fence. They came across that, police separated.
Okay, we're almost at the end of the segment here, and I've got one more question before you go. Were the M100s being thrown into the crowd from outside, or were the M100s somehow brought inside this disarmed zone and used there?
No, Antifa was not allowed in the disarm zone. They were completely outside.
So they were outside just throwing the M100s into the crowd. Okay, all right, that makes a lot of sense. All right, well, John,
they had sticks, bottles.
Good job pushing them back here, but again, obviously, it is looking like this is some staged event, another George Soros special, but I'm glad that they didn't succeed in whatever it was they wanted to do. But I have a feeling they'll be back trying again, so be vigilant and be prepared. We're going to let you go here now because we got to take our last commercial break of the show today, and we'll be back after.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much for the phone call. Stay safe, and we'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program on this Tuesday here. And here's another article from Natural News, and this really cuts to the core of why things are the way they are. Brain-damaging vaccines, pesticides, and medicines generate nearly $800 billion with a B a year in medical revenues. And what they're talking about is there is a growing body of evidence that these medications are harmful. They're causing neurological diseases. And you don't need me to tell you that. Just keep your eye on those TV commercials because you're going to see all of these ambulance-chasing law firms saying, did you take this medication and suffer harm? But it's all driven by the money. We live in a country where the government says, yeah, it's okay to sell harmful medications, vaccines, pesticides, food additives. There was another article we ran on whatreallyhappened.com today where there is a known cancer-causing chemical in shampoos. And the government has told the manufacturers they don't even have to list it on the ingredients. Because if you knew there was a carcinogenic chemical in the shampoo, you would stop using it. And that would cut into the profits, and we can't do this. So anyway, the researchers over at the University of Washington examined 3,500 men and women ages 65 years and older and found those that used a particular class of drugs had higher odds of developing dementia than those who did not take the medicine. In other words, dementia is not a natural outcome of growing old. It is a toxic response to these medications. The researchers said patients who took the drugs for 3 years or longer had a 54% increased odds of developing the mental disorder. But it's making money. Don't you understand? Things that make money are good, and things that don't make money, that's bad. And that really is the crux of the problem. When you have an industry that has that much revenue being generated, they can afford the best lawyers, the best lobbyists, they can buy up the media, they can buy up the Congress. And they don't care about the people that they hurt. Story over at the Daily Mail. Young woman, 28 years old, started taking a new contraceptive pill, thought she had a migraine headache, but she actually had a blood clot on the brain. And she's lost her eyesight and the feeling on the right side of her face. 28 years old. And the medication is known to cause blood clots. Pay attention to those glitzy commercials for prescription medication, where there's that voice at the tail end that says use of this medicine can do this. You should pay attention to that. And then ask how it is we live in a country where medicines that are that dangerous, that potentially are more harmful to you than the whatever illness is being cured, are allowed to be sold, let alone advertised on TV. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. And until then, take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. It looks like the U.S. has blinked on North Korea, but there are plenty of other potential wars out there. We have to keep up the pressure. We want peace and prosperity for all, not just riches for the few. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.